research institutes like Tsagi were extended by the scope of the project. Construction of the prototype began. Conventional aluminium alloys were not suitable for an aircraft that was to fly as fast as this. MiG chose to work in a material largely ignored by Western aircraft manufacturers, steel. Most of the E-155 was built of nickel steel alloys. Titanium, extremely expensive and difficult to work, was only used in places where the heat loads were expected to be highest. The structure was arc welded, rather than using the traditional Soviet method of riveting. In fact, the welding process was less labor-intensive than riveting, and since the aircraft would be much bigger than its predecessors, it was important to keep production costs down. Weight had to be kept to a minimum. To some extent, weight was traded for strength. The E-155 was designed to withstand a maximum load of only 5 Gs. Most fighters are twice as strong. But the Interceptor's mission was to fly fast, and there was a price to pay to achieve extreme speed. The project's chief designer was Nikolai Matyuk. Lev Shengelaya was his assistant. Matyuk had been at the MiG Bureau since its very first day of existence, December the 8th, 1939. Forged steel was used for the main structural members of the prototype. Titanium was used for the leading edges and around the tailpipes, but aluminium was used for some of the parts less exposed to the effects of heating at high speeds. Welding was used extensively. It was used to build up some complex structural components that would have been forged in the West. This is film taken in the Soviet Union on March the 10th, 1964. It is the first flight of the E-155, the prototype of what was to become the MiG-25. In the air, the similarity in layout to North American Vigilante is obvious. The main difference is the large twin vertical fins. MiG designers were concerned about the directional stability of the aircraft at extreme speeds, and there was a degree of overkill in the prototype. There were extra vertical surfaces on the wingtips and fairings which were meant to prevent wing flutter. Eventually, they were discarded. But the E-155 continued to suffer from control and stability problems that took a long time to overcome. The test pilot for the first flight was the great Alexander Fedotov. As he gets out of the cockpit, he gives some idea of the size of this new Soviet interceptor. This is the test rig used to develop the radar and the weapons control system of the MiG-25. It was entirely new. No existing Soviet radar was powerful enough to meet the Air Force's search and track requirements for the high-speed interceptor. The new radar was called the RP-25 Smirch, which means whirlwind. In the West, it became known as the Foxfire. It was designed to burn through any known jamming system at a range of up to 50 miles. It weighed 1,100 pounds, the largest and heaviest of its kind in the world. The purpose of the Smirch radar was not to detect or track a target. It was designed to provide a final, accurate target fix that could not be jammed, so the pilot and ground controller could position the aircraft for missile launch. In May 1964, just after the first flight of the Soviet E-155 interceptor, The long-awaited XB-70 Valkyrie rolled out of its hangar in Palmdale, California. By now, it was no longer a threat to the Soviets. It had been cancelled by the Kennedy administration. The threat of cancellation had hung around the Valkyrie project for some time. It was cancelled for the first time in 1959 and then reinstated in 1960. The final cancellation took place in early 1961, and the XB-70 prototypes were downgraded to research status. One of the reasons for the cancellation was that the U-2 incident in 1960 had demonstrated that Soviet surface-to-air missiles were more advanced than the West had suspected. Another was that the growth of ballistic missile technology was forcing a reassessment of long-range strategic bombing. And a third was that the Valkyrie project was extremely expensive. On the face of it, the cancellation of the XB-70 project might well have killed the MiG Mach-3 interceptor, but it didn't. Work proceeded for several reasons. One was that the XB-70 research program was continuing, and there was a possibility the cancellation could be reversed again. Another was that the new Soviet fighter could be used against the existing supersonic bomber, the B-58 Hustler. There's little doubt, too, that the Soviets knew of the development of the YF-12 interceptor and its reconnaissance derivative, the SR-71A Blackbird. Like the YF-12, the Blackbird was designed to be capable of speeds beyond Mach 3 and extreme high-altitude performance. It was initially developed in association with the CIA, which had operated the U-2 spy flights using non-military pilots. When the Cuban crisis developed in 1962, the Strategic Air Command took control of spy flights from the CIA. The reasoning at the time was that a civilian pilot shot down on a spy mission may well be executed as a spy. A military pilot, on the other hand, would be considered to be doing his job. When the Blackbird went into service in 1966, it was with the Strategic Air Command of the United States Air Force. As the test program of the MiG-25 prototype continued, Artyom Mikoyan, the general designer of the MiG Bureau, was concentrating on the development of the MiG-23, the new Mach 2 swing-wing fighter. Mikoyan had designed the basic layout of the MiG-25 prototype, but had been advised to avoid full commitment to such a demanding program because of risks to his health. In March 1965, his bureau made the first public announcement of performance figures achieved by the MiG-25 prototype. It had flown around a closed 1,000-kilometer course at an average speed of more than 1,400 miles an hour. Western defense analysts assumed that the aircraft was a development of the MiG-21, but they had a surprise coming. In 1967, the 50th anniversary of the October Revolution was celebrated by an air show at Domodedovo Airport outside Moscow. Late in the show, there was a pass by a group of aircraft that the show announcer referred to as interceptors capable of Mach 3. The Western defense analysts were puzzled by this announcement. No one believed the announcer's claims of performance. For a time, there was a misconception among some experts that the aircraft that flew by at Domodedovo were MiG-23s, the new MiG variable geometry fighter. Ironically, Russian enthusiasts who read the Western aviation press believed the same thing. They had nothing else to go on. There was very little public information about the MiG-25 anywhere, even in the Soviet Union. This confusion persisted till 1972, and the Soviets did nothing to clarify it. With the cancellation of the XB-70 Valkyrie and the YF-12 interceptor, the MiG-25's secondary function, high-altitude reconnaissance, assumed greater relative importance. The cameras fitted to the MiG-25R were capable of taking detailed pictures of the whole of the United Kingdom in the course of one flight. Reconnaissance MiG-25s could communicate directly with ground stations through a data link system. The MiG-25R, the first-generation reconnaissance variant, had 5 cameras in its large nose compartment and a limited capability side-looking radar. The later